Stuart, thanks very much indeed for joining us on the Piscari Insights series. I've done about 15 of these recently, and really, really interesting people like yourself with different perspectives, different insights. And we've discussed some questions which we'll get to in a second. But first of all, who are you, what's your background, and what do you do now?
Yeah, cheers, Mike. It's fun to do this. I've never done this kind of thing before, so it's going to be interesting, and thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Looking forward to it.
My background, I guess, 14, 15 years in marketing procurement at some global brands like Nike and Danone. I've always been a frustrated marketeer. I was briefly a marketeer when I left university, probably 17, 18 years ago now. I got my first procurement job when London won the Olympics, so 2008 or so. Teammate of mine at the marketing agency, his background was in procurement. He got a job in London, where I'm originally from. We were in Glasgow at the time, where I had been at university. So he moved me down to be part of his team, put me through a couple of years of the Chartered Institute, the SIP stuff at that time.
I do. Yeah.
Had a few different procurement roles over the years, and for the last 9 months or so, I've actually been working for myself. So I'm doing very little brand work now, so very little marketing procurement work. I'm actually doing a lot of work helping marketing agencies understand and navigate marketing procurement processes, and that's taken me down some really interesting rabbit holes. I ended up doing a lot of marketing and sales strategy for the agencies. So segmentation, targeting, positioning, not just how do we crack procurement, but how do we position the whole thing? How do we target the right brands? How do we get sticky with those brands? So that's what I'm up to now.
Very good. So let's get into the kind of questions that we'd kind of prepared. So the first one that we talked about was, what are your kind of key strategic insights aimed at marketing agencies about trends over the last 5 years about how brands have been buying marketing services? And there's a lot in this, I think, and you wrote some really interesting notes, so perhaps expand on your notes would be great.
Yeah, I'm going to try not to, I made some notes before the session because there's so much stuff that's happened in 5 years, but I think it probably just comes to life in the chat about it, and we can bounce it around. But yeah, I think if you go,
and some of it is rhetoric and some of it's reality. I think the interesting thing is, like Project Spring, we'll talk about Project Spring, intent versus action will be interesting to get your perspective.
Yeah, sure thing. So I guess, looking back 5 years ago or so, or a little bit back into the past, I think a lot of brands and agencies would admit that there were big retainers going on, so it would be kind of an all-you-can-eat buffet. Agency would get paid an amount of money every month, and the work would get done, and the discussion around performance or metrics would be relatively informal, let's say. And I think over the course of 5 years, we've seen more and more movement away from retainers with no measurement of performance, more towards project-based work, so less commitment from the brand, and much more towards value-based, performance-based outcomes and pricing. So, the agency and the brand will come together at the beginning of the agreement and say, look, what do we want to measure? What's important here? Is it speed, quality? Is it cost? Is it impact on the consumer? Is it brand metrics? What can we measure? What's hard to measure? In 5 years, we've moved much more towards measurement. And to your point about reality versus intent, I think there's a lot of broad understanding now at big brands and smaller brands as well, and also agencies that, outcomes and outputs are maybe better than charging, an hourly rate with a margin and these sorts of things.
Yes.
Because, you're not paying someone to get out of bed in the morning, you're paying them to do something for your brand. But I think the reality is a lot of people on the brand side and the agency side don't always have the time, the confidence, or the capability to put in place good metrics. So they default back to...
I'd agree.
They default back to inputs. So I think there's a big opportunity for both brands and agencies to get better at helping each other put metrics in place. Someone, I think the agencies who are going to win in the next year or two are going to be the ones who can make that easier for brands.
Absolutely right. So talk to me about something specific that on the buy side you'll have seen a lot of, and may in fact have kind of practiced at some point, as I did sometimes as well, which is the RFP comes out from marketing procurement. It goes out to 5 agencies or 7 agencies or whatever the number is. And you've got the outcomes in there, so there's something about business targets, there's something about scope, there's something about the criteria. So it's well structured, it's been well thought through. But then you get to the point of, could you fill in the rate card, please? So what's the description of this person's role? How senior are they? What's their hourly rate? How many hours will they spend on this piece of work? And it seems like it's just the fox and the chicken. They just can't help themselves putting that in the RFP. And yet, to your point earlier, that's an activity-based model, not an output or outcome-based model. So just kind of unwrap that for a second.
Yeah, so I think the confidence, capability, and time issue that let's say the procurement person I'll backtrack a bit. Procurement theoretically they want to put together a fair process. They want to be able to compare apples to apples. One of the ways that traditionally procurement person and I, over a long period of time, have felt that we're in charge of the cost piece or the pricing piece on behalf of the brand. That's the bit where we have to come in as the marketing procurement person and show that we're adding value to the process by having a comparable pricing template. It's going to help us with our negotiation strategy once we get all the prices. So what happens is we're in the habit of trying to control the pricing conversation, and what that does is it reduces agencies' ability to be innovative or creative in how things are priced. Yeah. Now, who are we as the brand to say what the value of the work is going to be? That we're paying the agency for some creativity of thought. And if they can come up with a way of showing us the value of their work, which is creative and innovative, we're stifling that by saying fill in our template. So
absolutely.
I know you'll probably ask me this a little bit later on, what might change in the next couple of years. I hope to see a little more agility in procurement processes, but also just conversations between agencies and the brand, or agencies and marketing procurement, on how things are priced. Because I think, if agencies were given the opportunity to be more creative in how they express value and price, they are creative people by inclination and by practice. So why not let them own the pricing discussion and let the brand consider, okay, does that work for us? And have a dialogue about it rather than force feeding them a template to fill in. I don't know if that answers.
I think that's a very, I think it's an interesting part of the discussion. I think, I'm an engineer by training. So when I was buying marketing services as a procurement person, my tendency is to compare at a unit rate measure. And everything I know about business says that's wrong, but it was the only way I felt comfortable about saying, okay, it gives me a comparator to your point. Mm-hmm. The moment it goes back into the hands of the agency and I've got 5 different models and it's really hard to compare, so I'm agreeing with you and I'm questioning, well, how is it going to work going forward? Because if I can't compare, then, as you say, what value am I adding in procurement? It's an interesting question. There isn't an answer, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah, I guess for me, part of the answer probably is around what is expected of marketing procurement, and it's slightly different from brand to brand, depending on the quality of the relationship, the risk profile, the type of consumer, how good the marketing procurement people are in terms of driving the engagement and gaining trust and a seat at the table to do strategic work. Some procurement teams will be at the beginning of their relationship, or a new stakeholder will come in and you almost have to earn the right to do some good marketing procurement work. You might be doing contracts and rate card negotiations. And over time, if you build the trust with the stakeholder, the budget holder, you'll be getting involved more early. You'll have more of a chance to do more creative versions of marketing procurement. And I think, if you can be saying to, especially very marketing-led businesses, like a Nike, for example, if you can, you're not going to get a seat at the table with the head of digital marketing at Nike if you come in and talk about savings. If you come in and talk about membership, and talk about membership, and you come in and talk about e-commerce, direct to consumer, speed, scale, then you might be allowed to do some procurement work, and you might deliver some savings along the way. But the metrics that marketing procurement at a brand like that is doing now, and a lot of other brands are doing this as well, is me and my team at a brand, and we want to be able to celebrate what the agency delivers in terms of the brand metrics. So it might be something that everyone might know, like Nike has a running club app or a training club app. What are the new signups that are coming? What are the active users per month? How's that trending, going up? And did we feed into that by selecting an agency who did the strategy and so on and so forth? And we want to be celebrating that as a marketing procurement team rather than the savings alone, but the other types of value that you brought to the table.
So that's a very good point and a very good example as well. So just kind of giving advice to our audience, because the people that listen to my content, typically marketing agency owners, brands, procurement people inside brands, and entrepreneurs across a mixture of sectors. When the RFP comes in and it's got the dreaded spreadsheet, which is pre-filled in and you've got to kind of complete it to be compliant, what's your advice to them about that? What, although in the RFP it's clear they want business results and deliverables, but yet you've got this dreaded rate card in there. What would you recommend?
Yeah, so I would say my opinion on this has changed over time. I used to be really offended when an agency wouldn't fill in my pricing template, and since
so did I. No, I was the same.
Yeah. And since making it my business, my career to engage agencies, I hear more and more, that they ask the same question. And I think where I'm at right now, what my opinion is always a little bit evidence-based. It's not, it's not something that's set in stone. And what I see working really well, and I would encourage agencies to try this, is, by all means, fill in the template. That way, at least you're keeping one stakeholder group at the brand on side. So you're treading lightly. Let's say you're treating procurement as a stakeholder. And you're not annoying anyone, but don't be afraid to also say, look, here's option B, guys. Here's how we would price this if it was up to us entirely. But here's your template filled in, so box ticked. Here's another way of looking at it. We're going to deliver this in 2-month sprints, and at the end of every 2-month sprint, there's going to be a workshop, and that's a fixed fee deliverable. And if we drive X, Y, and Z, then maybe we get a bonus. But here's our other ways of thinking about it. And we know in terms of sales strategy that offering people packages and options leaves you a much higher chance of reaching agreement. So you give someone 2 options, and one of them happens to be a stack of different prices with different ways of looking at it. I think that the neuroscience of the way that the brand is, that the person is thinking who receives that is, which parts of this might work for me? When you give someone one way of looking at it, your brain goes, I don't know if that's for me. So your chance of reaching agreement is much higher if you look at it both ways, if you present it 2 ways.
I don't know if you've read the stuff by Blair Enns, but Blair does a great piece on this, which is about exactly that, is the neuroscience behind how we choose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm actually reading his Win Without Pitching manifesto right now.
The little black book. It's good, isn't it?
Yeah. It's it's actually up here.
It's on the shelf.
Yeah.
I can see it. It's a great read, and he's a very talented guy. I've spoken to him on a couple of occasions. He's very talented. Yeah, exactly. And he, without revealing any anything that he wouldn't want to say, he's not a fan of procurement people at all, and he makes that quite public on his podcast because of the way that, I think. And this will lead us on to Project Spring, the way that marketing procurement in the past 20 years perhaps have treated agencies has delivered very low margins for agencies. So in terms of their ability to make money and grow, the pips have been squeezed out of the orange. And it's left a lot of agencies in a pretty bad state. Now, you could argue, well, the agencies should transform, they should become more efficient, they should do all sorts of things. But I think marketing procurement, and I count myself in the same basket, we've driven that. It's about savings, it's about driving down the price, it's about getting the KPIs to be really tough to meet, about service credits, about rebates. All of that stuff has taken its toll on agencies.
I think there's a part of me which agrees directionally, in the sense that where procurement has come from has been very, very price and cost focused. I think there are lots of good procurement people, marketing procurement people now who are much more eloquent at having a conversation about other types of value and understand value through the eyes of the agency, through the eyes of their marketing stakeholders, not just through the eyes of dollars and cents. And I think there are a lot of brands now who are very good at having that conversation, and to a certain extent driving that right through their marketing procurement team, so that interns that come in, junior, less experienced procurement people, are being taught the principles of value-based pricing, other types of remuneration models, and are people who are primarily stakeholders to marketing, who can go in and talk in a marketing language with their stakeholders, so they are credible and they bring the procurement stuff around it, so they can run a good process. They can talk about value in different ways. But first and foremost, they understand that the consumer is at the center of everything. We're going to go out and find some really good agencies, and we're going to do our best to bring them in the most time efficient, cost efficient, energy efficient way, and then we're going to get out of the way and let the magic happen. What I think agencies have a huge responsibility to do is to get more obsessed with how they do their positioning and targeting to brands, and go and have these one-to-one conversations where they have expertise and relevance with a certain type of brand, and go and take control of that conversation. Don't wait for RFPs to come in. If you wait for an RFP, if 100% of your revenue comes in through RFPs, they will always be about price. They will always be 4 or 5 other agencies snapping at your heels. Your chance to control the conversation and your opportunity to exert control over the process is diminished because someone's come to you with their own baked process. What I think is one of the things that I'm coaching agencies is take more control of, treat yourselves like a brand, and brands are your customers. How are you perceived? Well, what do you know about the market? Do some segmentation, targeting, positioning, the Mark Ritson stuff. Do all of that for yourselves. And then with very tailored outreach, go and develop relationships with these brands. And then you will be in control.
So ABM, so account-based marketing. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting you talk, I come at it from the same way. I mean, I talk to agencies about the marketing procurement process, and I say the same thing. I say the time to engage with marketing procurement is outside the RFP process. 2 or 3 years ahead of often where you want to work with a brand, you should be treating the procurement people like any other stakeholder. You target messages towards them, you start to build relationships, you add value to their lives. I talk about category planning, which is quite interesting. A lot of agencies don't know what category planning is. They're like, well, what does that mean? And when you explain how marketing or how procurement do category planning, and that it goes often in a 3 or 5 year cycle, and if you know when that cycle's coming up, you can start to add value to the process, and that's how you become a friend of procurement, by adding value and bringing market data. Mm-hmm. It's like a light bulb goes on and they go, okay, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
have you found the same thing, Stuart, when you've been talking to them?
Yeah, and I think if some of the best cold outreach that I've been on the receiving end of from agencies has been where you can tell straight away that you're not one of 1,000 people getting a generic email, an aggregated email that's being targeted at an FMCG brand or sports retail brand, but they've done their research about your consumer. They've done their research about what your marketing operation is currently doing. So they've shown you straight away, without having to shout about it, that they've done their research. That makes you like them immediately. So again, neuroscience of persuasion, there's some reciprocity there. They've put some effort in. They've sent you
Absolutely.
something for free. They've sent you. They've shown a bit of their expertise, their initiative, their mindset, and you're suddenly on site. And and if it's got recency as well, if it's something which is really relevant to what's happening internally at the brand, then I will send that on to the senior director of whatever, part of the marketing team and say, look, by the way,
That's right.
I reckon, so I feel like my job is to bring the best of the outside in. I don't have to wait for an RFP to be
Exactly
doing that.
right.
I don't have to wait for an RFP to be doing that. Here's a really cool agency who get it. Let's have a session with them. Shall I set it up? So, if agencies, I don't want to be too harsh to marketing, procurement, or to brands, because I think it's just sometimes, as I say, the time and the ways of working are quite embedded at this point. But I think agencies, if they can do that little bit of that specific piece of targeting to brands where they have relevance with that consumer or with that category, make a bit of effort to really tailor something to the CMO, to marketing, procurement, or whoever. But knock on the doors. And some of the biggest, some of the most profitable wins that an agency will get will come from diagnosing, exploring, having conversations with someone, a leader at the brand. And by the time it comes to the agency putting a price on the thing, they've understood what the value is to the stakeholder. They can probably price it however they want, and they'll say yes, because they've created that dialogue, they've understood the problems, they've diagnosed it over a long period of time. And they haven't done it through an RFP process. They've spent a bit of that time that might be lost doing loads of RFPs, but they've done some research and some targeting, and then they've jumped the queue. They've jumped the queue and they don't have to do the RFPs.
We're definitely singing from the same hymn sheet, that's for sure. I say the same thing to agencies, absolutely. So just to kind of bring this all together, so in terms of the next kind of like 12, 24 months, the kind of three things that you'd kind of recommend that agencies look at in terms of what marketing procurement are going to be needing in the next 12, 24 months, because the world has changed. We are in a post-recessionary environment. There is growth, but growth often comes at a significant cost because it's a buyer's market. What do you think agencies should be thinking about that marketing procurement will be thinking about?
So this is really two-pronged for me, because what a lot of agencies will do is they'll be in the mindset of saying, right, where are the attractive accounts who've got big marketing budgets, and how do I target those? So my previous point around targeting. But a lot of those brands are not in a state of growth at the moment, and they are probably getting some lower marketing budgets, some of them. I know a lot of brands have had to make headcount cuts, a lot of headcount cuts going on. So I'm guessing a lot more competition between brand managers at big holding companies to ask the CMO or whatever for money. So I think on one hand side, I fear for some agencies waiting for RFPs are going to be even more price focused than normal. And it's even more important that agencies are doing research on not just the arbitrary brands that we can all recall because they've been on TV for 20 years, but what are the categories that are growing very, very quickly? What types of consumer groups are new and that are growing quickly? So I was talking to an agency yesterday, and a very informal conversation, bouncing ideas about up and coming categories, and we were talking about medical psychedelics, cryptocurrencies, so on and so forth. Workplace health apps, these new categories, whether it's driven by COVID or not. Where is the resource from these agencies going in to understand these categories? Who's in there? Who are the big players? Who probably doesn't have a marketing procurement team because they're growing so quickly that they haven't got these functions in place. But there are going to be brands who are growing very quickly, who are spending money, and if you just know how to look for them, you will find them. So don't always go down the route of, okay, we're going to try and crack into the top 300 brands in the world. They've got legacy relationships. They've got really drawn out, set in their way contract processes. I would say go and find the up and coming categories and try and tinker around.
Find the challenges.
Try and find some new types of these new categories, and where can you bring relevance to those? And they will be people who will be more than happy to hear from you, because they don't necessarily have a strict process to follow. They're growing too quickly to have even thought about it.
Exactly. No, very good.
Anything
else you want to kind of like leave the audience with? Yeah. So what's your kind of like final thoughts for the audience in terms of your how, if you were an agency, what would you be doing now?
Final thought. I think. Well, look, this is a Blair Enns quote. That the only true differentiator is expertise. It's not price. It's not people. It's not process. Now, I may be regurgitating that secondhand. I'm not saying that it's my learned opinion, but it really resonated with me.
No.
So, as an agency owner and an agency leader, your expertise is everything. It's the thing that differentiates you from what brands may see as a very undifferentiated market. In the eyes of brands, there are 1,000 PR agencies, there are 1,000 media agencies who all sound and look and smell the same. And that's the lazier part of brands are very lucky, is what I'm getting at. Brands are very lucky. There's such a big marketplace of agencies out there. Differentiate yourselves. Get obsessed with your positioning and then go and target the brands where your positioning works. And don't be afraid to test different things. Don't be afraid to test different positioning, different types of messaging, different types of outreach. And the main one is do 2 or 3 different types of pricing. You get to prepare the pricing that you're happy with. And if you send 3 options that you're equally as happy with, the brand's pretty likely to choose one of them. Don't just stick with one pricing option. So a bit of a mix of 2.
I talk about. No. I mean, I concur about. For many years, I was ex-KPMG, so I was trained in kind of formal consulting processes and how you build relationships at C-suite. And one of the key things that I was taught was your job is to become the trusted advisor. Mm-hmm. And the only way to become a trusted advisor is to have deep expertise in a very particular field. Sure, if you're dealing with the chief exec and you're a global client partner, you need to have quite a big coverage. But actually what most brands buy from agencies, I believe, is that kind of inch wide, mile deep. You're looking for true expertise. Unless you're buying a full service offering from one of the bigger agencies, the smaller agencies need to be an inch wide, a mile deep, as Pat Flynn would say, and real experts. Because you're right, that's what differentiates you. Why do people buy me for the work I do on helping sales teams improve their negotiating skills? Mm-hmm. Because when they talk to me, hopefully, they see that I've got true, deep expertise from a buyer's perspective.
Totally agree.
And I think that is the way forward.
And the thing with having that deep expertise and being able to show that you are head and shoulders above your competition is you are more in control of the pricing conversation, because there is scarcity at your level of expertise. There is scarcity. If you position yourselves as a one-stop shop agency who can do a bit of everything, get ready to do a lot of RFPs and come second and third pretty often.
Correct. Absolutely. And on that point, that's a good point to finish, Stuart. So where can people find out more about you?
The company's called Don't Forget to Look. So don'tforgettolook.com. Stuart Dunk on LinkedIn. Don't forget to look on LinkedIn. That's about it.
Very good. Stuart, it's been a real pleasure. And I think, again, seeing it from a buyer's perspective who's been deep in that category for many years, and understanding how you perceive other agencies and how you like to be engaged by agencies, I think has been very insightful. So thank you. And thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, cheers, Mike. It was fun.